Spread the fire, fam. Welcome back to SMWX. And if you're new around here, my name is Dr. Sizwe Mpofu-Walsh. And on this channel, SMWX, we explore South African politics through interviews and analysis. In today's episode, I speak to Shubnum Khan, the author of How I Accidentally Became a Global Stock Photo. Hope you enjoy. Aye. Shubnum Khan, thanks for joining us on SMWX and thanks for this brilliant book.
Thanks so much for having me.
So, How I Accidentally Became a Global Stock Photo is a fascinating read in that it straddles so many different genres. I'm interested in how the book evolved in your mind and how you came upon combining these different forms of writing into this one quite unique work.
Well, I think like everybody, I always had an idea in my head that I'm going to write a story about my life, but like I thought much more in the future. And, but then I got a push from Andrea Netras, who is my publisher at Pan Macmillan. And she approached me and said, why don't you collect all these funny stories that you're sharing on Twitter and social media and put them together in a book? And that was kind of the push. So we didn't know what form it was going to have. We didn't know if it was what it was going to look like at all. But I just sort of agreed to this and she just put it out there. And I really would say it found its own form as I was going through it. So I had no idea. I was just reading a lot of memoir at the time. I read like 70 books last year during the pandemic. That was the only thing I was doing was just, because I couldn't find the voice for the book. I was struggling because I was like, it's going to be a funny book because it's funny stories. But then I'd like end up reflecting on situations, growing up and the challenges I faced. And so then it ended up becoming serious. And I kept saying, I'm writing 2 books. I don't know how to put this book together. And so it was really a lot of like reading and writing and working through it and finding the structure. And so I think it's a very strange, funny little book. And that's why we call it part travelogue, part memoir, part love letter, because it's all these things that kind of got put together in the way it does. And I like that. I like that it's a hybrid of sorts. Just because it sort of reflects, I think, the disjointed way my life came together in a good way, but, in a strange way. And so that's kind of like how we came up with this idea. And so it dips into different things. But I try to keep a consistent voice throughout the book.
Yeah, that's an interesting observation. It's funny because right, and I've had the same thing where you're like, oh, I want to make a funny book, and then suddenly my book turned out to be like super serious, the first one, but I first thought I wanted it to be funny, and then I realized how hard writing something that's actually funny is, and I think that's one of the achievements of your book. Probably the hardest thing to do with writing is to actually make something funny. But there were certainly moments where I found myself chuckling. Take us through like the idea of humor, because I've seen some of the other interviews you've given, and they're focused on, the vulnerability in the book and the serious aspects of the book, which are certainly evident. But I'm interested in this idea of why and how you chose to invoke humor to get your message across.
Yeah, I'm so glad for that question, actually. Nobody asks me about the humor, and there is funny things in
I'm
the
like,
book.
it's funny, people. Like, it's lighthearted.
I know.
No
one, like, I don't remember anyone asking me about thank you for asking this question. That actually makes me happy. Yeah, that's such an interesting question. I do not think I'm a funny person. Like, if you follow me on social media, I don't think I'm a funny person. I really didn't think I would write a funny book. I think a lot of the humor comes out of the book just because I keep talking about how afraid I am of doing things, and then I end up doing it. And it's a lot about just putting my fears out there and the more absurd things that we think about in our mind and we don't share with other people. And I think that's where the humor comes from. but also secretly inside my heart, I do think I'm a funny person. But in general, I think people don't appreciate it in real life. But I think when I'm writing and I have the space for room, for nuance, and like putting together the story, then I can get the humor a bit right. So yeah, I enjoyed that part. I enjoyed looking for the funny bits. Because, you know, with my first novel, with Onion Tears, it was fiction and it was kind of serious with, you know, these characters, these Muslim ladies, and the kind of problems that they're facing. And so um, I just didn't think I would be writing something funny about my life. And it's nice because as I get older, I realize the importance of laughing at things. So I think like when I was in my 20s and younger, I would just like take everything so seriously. And I think as you get older, you realize the only way to endure certain situations is just to laugh at it. And that's the only way you can get past it, you know. And it's getting so bad now that even in serious situations I start laughing, and my sister is like, you can't laugh at these things, they're not, this is not a funny situation that's happening right now. I'm like, I can't help it, it's like it's how I'm dealing with the situation. And so I think there's a lot of power in humor, and if you can wield it correctly, you can tell an important story and take the reader with you on that important journey, and still make it a comfortable, easy journey, you know? So yeah.
Well, that brings me on to one of the themes of the book that I certainly noticed. And there are many different things going on, but well, one of the sections is on softness, and a lot of the stories resolve on this very counterintuitive note, because many memoirs and books which recount people's experience are ultimately about saying like, toughen up, you know, become wise to the world and harden up, basically. And your book is like the opposite of that. It's like through adversity and through experience, soften and open yourself to new experiences and laugh at yourself more. So take us through this theme of unsoftness or being soft and how you arrived at that.
Yeah, I think Sizwe, everybody has an experience in life that really changes them, or they really something. Yeah, I mean, everybody goes through grief or something terrible, and I think there's a point afterwards where you can choose to be bitter about it if it was a bad situation, or you can choose to be soft. And it's very easy to take either. Like, you know, it's not like I'm saying the one is easier to take. And I think I was just becoming very hard for like a few years, and then there was a point when I was in China, and I can only see it now. I think you can see things in retrospect only. You can't see it when you're going through it. But I started to become very soft with myself, in the sense that I started apologizing to myself, which was very strange. But I used to beat myself up over how I behaved before. I would be like, oh, this was so embarrassing, or this was so terrible. How could you behave like that? How could you keep doing that? And now when I look at it, or at least when things started changing, I started saying, oh, you know, you gave so much of yourself. Like, that's so wonderful. You're such a nice person. Or to the effect, like, you know, I'm proud of you for believing in that, for believing something would happen, you know? And so that kind of changed my whole perspective on myself. And so physically, even I'd start like buying flowers and hanging up flowers in my studio. And it's sort of like, if I look at it now, there were signs everywhere that I was changing and that I was becoming softer. And the moment I started becoming softer, I started liking myself more. And that just changed the whole game for me, because when you start liking yourself more, everything changes. It's how people react around you to you, and how you start planning your future for yourself. And I was feeling very stuck in my life at that point. And I would say I'm in a similar position now then, but I'm just so much more happier now, because I accept myself for who I am. And so I think for me, it was very important to put that section in the book on softness, and to talk about those stories that led me to becoming softer. And, you know, like I met a lady in Morocco who I would never have gone up to a stranger and hugged a stranger, you know, but I went and did that. And I think it was just because I was learning like a little bit of empathy. And these kind of situations make you see things in yourself that you would never see before. And so it was important to have a section talking about how being soft was really just one of the most wonderful choices I made in my life, and which I would encourage anyone to do. And it's something that you will keep carrying with you as you go on in the future, because you remembered you chose grace instead of anger and bitterness, and so it will be something that you keep carrying with you continuously into your future, hopefully. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like I say, there are these serious and somber moments, and then there's the lighthearted ones. I have to say, obviously, to the viewer, to the listener, read the book, because you'll get, all these different elements. But I just want to give you a taste of some of the stories, and the one I'd like you to just focus on, because it has so many different elements, is the one on page 95. Which is the start of the A Whole New World section. I almost went to Guantanamo Bay. Like, in a nutshell, obviously, the book is filled with these gems. But can you take us through the story, like especially the part with your dad and the message, because that's just like it just doesn't get funnier than that, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, at the time it wasn't funny, but now I laugh about it. Yeah, I was flying to New York for the first time. It was my first trip alone. I was very nervous. Like I talk in the book about, I'm an anxious, nervous person, and I was nervous, and this was 2015, and there was Wi-Fi on the plane. So this was so interesting to me. Like I was like, oh, I'm going to message everybody because I'm on the plane and I have Wi-Fi, and I kept messaging my dad, and we were having a philosophical discussion about how we're so high up and we can communicate. And I was like, yeah, like Allah is so great. We're so high up. And now if I can talk to you like this, can you imagine this is how we talk to God when we're praying, because he can get our message so high up and you can get my message. And we were having this discussion. And then I told him 2 hours to destination, and I left the message, and then when I looked at the message later on, I saw that autocorrect had changed destination to detonation. And so it was basically like I was praising God, and then I said 2 hours to detonation, and I was flying into New York, and I'm Muslim, and it's the first time I'm flying to America. And I was so scared when I saw that message. I just, I said there was a cardiologist next to me, and I thought the cardiologist would have to revive me because I was so scared. And my heart was beating so fast. And I kept typing to him, typo, typo, typo. This is a mistake, because I just thought like there are people watching and they're going to arrest me when I land, or they're going to arrest me now on the plane. And I need to clarify that it was a mistake, And I mean, it was really funny, but I mean, I also think it spoke to like how it is to travel as a Muslim. And I genuinely was scared for my life because of this mistake on my phone.
Yeah, absolutely. I just think that story sums up so much of what the book is about. And I think one other thing in closing is it's an interesting approach to critique, because I find a lot of critique in this work, but it's a different kind of critique. It's a kind of compassionate critique. So there's a lot of work which is memoir driven, which is like, oh, this part of my life was so terrible, and all these people are so evil, and this society and is so evil. But what you tend to do is say like, this was a terrible situation, or even I was in this situation, and the Muslim community may have played a role, even my father may have played a role, but it's not like an attack. It's a compassionate critique. That's the only way I can look at it. Was that something conscious that you tried to do in the book, to approach these situations with nuance, or do you think that's just something that's part of your writing style, or even your approach to life?
Yeah, I think because I think every situation has so much of nuance and layers to it, right? And I don't ever want to portray something one way, because I understand, and especially like I guess from the community I come from as well, I understand. Like, so in the book I talk about how my dad never let me travel alone and how frustrating it was, and because I was a girl and I was just not allowed, and it went against everything he believed in, and it was something we argued for a long time. Um, but then also, yes, the other side of it was that sometimes when we'd argue about it so much, or it'd get to such a point, he would fly, and I mean, I know this is a privilege, but he would fly to those countries to take me to make that possible. So if I wanted to go and teach in Kashmir, you know, and so he would do it within his own understanding of him keeping to the rules. And so I couldn't hold it against him because he was doing it within his own understanding of things. And so, yeah, I think that is my approach to life, and the approach to book is like that. It's not always so simple, and you can't always just like bash something or criticize it without looking at the full picture, you know? And so, I mean, definitely there are frustrating things and there are wrong things, and there are things to critique for sure. But in my situation in the book, I wanted to present all sides of it, you know? And so I like this idea of compassionate critique. I wanted to present it as true as possible as it is for me and the way I face it and the kind of dilemma I also have looking at these situations from my perspective. Yeah.
Well, Shubnum, it's a great book. Everyone, go and get yourself a copy of How I Accidentally Became a Global Stock Photo. And thanks so much for joining us on SMWX.
Thanks so much for having me. It was great.
Aye.